These days I'm visiting my parents in Italy and I'm taking this trip as an opportunity to discover some Italian games. And so as I was here, I picked up this game, Tesseract, published by Strate Libri and Giochi Uniti and designed by two Italian designers. The game is available with rules in English and in Italian. The components are language neutral, as you will see, and so you can definitely play it. I mean, if you don't speak Italian. It is a simple card game that reminds me of the board game Manhattan, which I reviewed a couple of months ago, to the point, in fact, that it pretty much feels like Manhattan, the card game. The theme is different. It is about these gods that are manipulating energies in order to influence a Tesseract, which is a pattern of mystical energies and blah, 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 blah. In other terms, you're trying to place cards in the central section, which will go in the middle of the table. This section, this pattern of 9 cards, you're trying to form different patterns that will allow you to score these cards here, which will give you 3 points. You also have other game effects that will give you these cubes here, which are worth a victory point each. At the end of the game, the player with the highest total of points is the winner of the game. So you will have 2 types of cards. These that are simply patterns that you're trying to score by forming patterns of colors in the central area. So if, for example, there was a red card here, a yellow card here, and a blue card here, I would be able to score this card like this would be the case. All right, red, yellow, and blue. Yes, this is yellow, this is blue, and this is red. They're not, I don't know, after a while they became more easy to tell apart. At the beginning I was a little bit confused. This looks more like dark brown, this one has very little red, but for game purposes, they're both red cards. Also, I guess that the game is completely unplayable by colorblind players. As a non-colorblind player, sometimes I am a little bit uncertain as to whether this is yellow or red, but again, so be it. I think these cards, they wanted to make them pretty, and I wish they had coded them in different ways, or at least in ways that are easier to tell apart. But this is the point. You're trying to form these configurations here, and then you show, haha, look at this. I have red, yellow, and blue. Also, these cards have a little triangle, as you can see, that indicates the orientation of the card. That is, when you take these cards from this deck here, you will place them in front of you where you're sitting with the triangle pointing to the central area. That means the player that sits on this side will place this card here, and so will score this card if blue is here, yellow is here, and red is here. For this is the player sitting here, the card will be placed here, and this is why you score this way and this way. And this is what really reminded me of the game Manhattan more than anything. So you have this deck of cards here with these patterns, and then these are the cards here that are the cards producing the divine energies that you're trying to arrange and calibrate and blah, blah, blah. You will have a hand of cards coming from this deck here. Now, what happens is that during your turn, you must do one of several things. You may take a card. There will be 2 available face up visible. You may take one of these 2 scoring cards, you place it in front of you, and then this is replaced there, and this is one of your actions. Basically, during your turn, you must take an action, and at the end, if you can score one of these cards, you score. So an action may be take a new card from here, but not if you already have 2. That's the maximum that you can have. Not exactly. Dark game effects may give you more, but if you have 2, you cannot select the action of getting a new card here of this kind. Another action that you can do is to draw a card from here, but not if you already have 5. If 5 is not necessarily the maximum number of cards, but if you have 5 in your hand, then you cannot get more with the action of getting a card from here. And then the main action is to play a card from your hand into the central area. When you play a card, you place it on top of another card, therefore changing the energy. It has to be of a different color. You cannot play red over red, for example. And when you play a card, you also execute, if possible, the bonus action indicated at the bottom. For example, this one is one of the most powerful actions, if not the most powerful actions. Allows you to slide a row or column on the central area by one position and move the one that you pretty much kicked out of the pattern to the other side. Or if I were to take the same action here, it would go like this. Later, you will have piles of cards instead of single cards, but still not too much of a problem. So when I play this card somewhere, again, I get to move a row or a column, not necessarily the one in which I place the card. This one lets me draw 2 cards from the deck. This one lets me steal a card from another player's hand. After all, that is Loki, the tricky guy. This one lets me play another card of this kind from my hand if I have it. And Cthulhu, for some reason, lets me get one of these cards from here. Also, Lady Luck, when I play her, simply gives me one of these cubes, which is worth a victory point at the end of the game. You continue like this until either this deck is exhausted, or this deck is exhausted, or all of these cubes have been assigned, which is pretty much every time that I play the game, it ended because of this more than because of other things. Sometimes these decks are pretty thin, but ultimately it always came down to that. Continue like this until again one of these situations occurs. Then you total points that you get from cards that you scored and cubes that you collected, and the player with the highest total is the coolest and most effective god of the Tesseract. So this is the game. This is the general idea. It's an okay game. I did not dislike it. And I enjoyed playing it a couple of times. I played with my daughter Amelia, who also same thing. She enjoyed it. She didn't hate it. Once we put it back in the box, we moved on. We started playing other stuff, and for some reason, we didn't really feel like playing it again. We didn't hate playing it. We didn't feel drawn to it. I would say that the staying power is pretty limited. On one hand, I like the idea, I like the decision. So I like the game Manhattan, so I was pretty excited about playing this one actually, because it looked like a much more portable and easy to set up and put away and quicker and simpler version of Manhattan. Manhattan Light, Manhattan Express. It turned out, however, that Manhattan has a lot more meat, has a lot more strategy, and here the strategy turned out to be pretty limited and in general to be obfuscated by a really considerable amount of luck. When I was able to do things, the game was fun, and in particular when I had interesting choices to choose between. I love the puzzle that comes from figuring out how you set up a situation, then you slide things around and you create the pattern. Some of the times the game goes on autopilot. Sometimes I see a card here which is already there, then I spend my action for the game to take the card and I score it, and so that's kind of like meh. Not super exciting. Other times, and this is really what weakened to me the experience of the game, and there's been every game that I played, maybe 25%, 30% of the game was spent with cards that I couldn't do much with, just waiting to get the card that I needed, etc., etc. Because maybe to score the patterns that I have, I just need a yellow card. I need to add a yellow card on the board. I could slide things, well, maybe the only yellow cards are so far that I would need 3 or 4 to slide them where I need them to be, so that's not an option. I need a yellow card and I don't have it in my hand. Could I play this one? Well, this one lets me play more cards on my hand, and if I don't have the card that I need, so that is useless. This one may not be, again, may not be possible. This one still doesn't gives me a point, all right, but maybe I'm still stuck with the card that I need. Maybe I get lucky and I steal it from you, but maybe I don't. This one, I still remember I need a yellow card. This gives me more of these, doesn't give me the yellow card. So basically, if there is a card of a color that you really need and you don't get it, there isn't much that you can do to mitigate that. And while there were phases of the game in which I was really having a good time, then I got stuck like, okay, but to score my cards, I need a yellow card, and I don't have any yellow cards. And these other actions don't really give me what I need, and so I just spent part of the game waiting for that darn card, and then I finally got it, and I played it, and I scored, and it didn't even feel like, well, I built up to it, paid off. No, it's something that I wanted to do 5 turns ago, and I'm doing now. Also, I'm not a big fan of games where all you can do in your turn is to draw a card. It just feels like, again, that's really not much of a decision. It's not an interesting decision. So I like the general idea. Overall, the execution to me felt pretty weak. It's not a terrible game. Maybe it can be refitted. Maybe with actions that give you more cards, it can be improved. As is, it is a game that feels, again, there's a potential, but most of the game felt pretty mindless because either there were absolutely obvious options, just score a card. Why wouldn't you? Or you didn't have much of an option because luck didn't give you the resources that you need to implement an interesting strategy. So Tesseract, it was okay. I don't know that I'll play it much in the future. Not that I will play it in the future. When I want to play a game of this type, I guess I'll just wait until I get a chance to play Manhattan, which of course is logistically more complex, but also so much more rewarding. So Tesseract is not terrible, but overall it felt like a pretty weak game to me.